Mama, please come and take me home. I want to come back home. Can you imagine how it feels to cry out for help? Yet you only hear the echoes of your own desperation. How many minors do you think go through the same feeling? How many suffer inhumane treatment for the same people they expect love and care from? Those they call family. She wailed and pleaded with her mom. The sharp pain from the slap immediately woke Sugai. Once again, it was just but a dream. Sugai's eyes snapped open, her heart racing as she struggled to catch her breath. The familiar walls of her small room seemed to be closed in around her, a harsh reminder that she was far from the home she has longed for. The moonlight streaming through the window cast eerie shadows on the walls, making her feel even more alone and scared. She lay there for a moment, trying to calm her racing thoughts and slow down her pounding heart. But the memory of the dream lingered, refusing to be shaken off. Just then, a loud voice pierced the ear, making Zugai's heart skip a beat. Will you rush to the kitchen and start the fire, or you want me to pounce on you again? Mr. Kuzai shouted from the parlor. She immediately raced out of her bed. She already knew what would happen next. This has been the event of her life for the past 4 years. The fear and anxiety had become a familiar companion, one that she couldn't shake off no matter how hard she tried. With a sense of resignation, she hastily made her way to the kitchen, her heart heavy with the knowledge of what lay ahead. Zugai was only 13 when she lost her father, after which her family unraveled. Her mother, Maman Zugai, had always struggled with finances, but the losses of her husband pushed her beyond what she could manage. Bills piled up and the once cherished home, perched at the edge of town on a quiet hill, became a place of despair. The electricity was cut off, the water was turned off, and soon the cold became unbearable. With nowhere else to turn, Suga was sent to live with her older sister Godia, a nurse who worked few kilometers away from her husband in the town of Kachia, a place far removed from the memories of her father's death. She had hoped the change of scenery would help her some solace, but instead, it brought her face to face with a new set of challenges. Her brother-in-law, Mr. Kuzaid, also known as Mr. Kuzi, was a strict and demanding man who seemed to take great pleasure in making her life as difficult as possible. And her sister Godia, who had once been her closest confidant, now seemed distant and detached, as if she was too afraid to intervene on Zugai's behalf. As Zugai navigated the treacherous landscape of her new life, she couldn't help but wonder if she would ever find a place where she truly belonged. Few months into her new life, Zugai had begun to settle into a new routine. She would wake up early, help with the house chores, and then head off to school. But despite the familiarity of her new surroundings, she couldn't shake off the feeling of unease that had been growing inside her. It started with small things. Mr. Kuzi would make comments about her appearance, or find fault with the way she did her chores. At first, Suga had tried to brush it off, telling herself that it was just him trying to make her become a better person. But as time went on, his comments became more frequent and more suggestive. One evening, as she was washing the dishes, Suga felt a hand on her shoulder. She turned to see Mr. Kuzi standing behind her, a sly grin spreading through his face. "You're doing a great job, Suga," he said, his voice low and menacing. "But you could have done even better if you had just cooperated with me." Zugai's heart skipped a beat as she felt a wave of fear wash over her. She didn't exactly know what Mr. Kuzi was insinuating, but she knew she had to get away from him as fast as she could. She quickly rinsed off the dishes and made a hasty excuse, fleeing to the safety of her room. As she locked the door behind her, Zugai couldn't help but wonder if she had made a terrible mistake coming to live with her sister and her husband. She felt trapped and alone, with no one to turn to, and as she lay in bed listening to the sound of Mr. Kuzi's laughter drifting from the living room, she knew she had to find a way to escape before it was too late. As the days went by, Zugai couldn't shake off the feeling that Mr. Kuzi's behavior towards her was becoming increasingly unsettling. She tried to avoid him as much as possible, but it seemed like he was always lurking around. watching her every move. One evening as she was washing the dishes, Zugwai felt a hand on her waist. She startled and turned around, her heart racing. It was Mr. Kuzi, a slight grin spreading through his face. In her panic, Zugwai's hand flew up and she slapped him across the cheek. What? Zu! Lafienki! How dare you slap me? And before she could say anything, his eyes twisted in anger and he lunged at Zugwai, his fist flying. She tried to defend herself, but he was too strong. He beat her so mercilessly, the blows raining down on her until she collapsed to the floor, crying and begging him to stop. As she looked up at Mr. Kuzi, Kina Kolona, she saw a glimmer of something in his eyes that made her blood run cold. It was a warning, a threat that he would make her pay for what she had done. And Zugwai knew that she was in grave danger. Godia came back the next day, her eyes scanning the room as if she was searching for something. When she saw Zugwai, she rushed over to her, concern etched on her face. What, Zugwai? May I make you? Eh? She asked, her voice trembling. Zugwai looked up at her sister, her eyes welling up with tears. She tried to speak, but her voice was caught in her throat. Godia's eyes widened as she took in Zugwai's bruised and mattered face. Did he do this to you? Godia asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Zugwai nodded, feeling a lump form in her throat. Godia's face contorted in anger and sadness. She pulled Zugwai into a tight hug. I'm so sorry, but Sokut, Godia whispered, her tears falling onto Zugwai's shoulder. I'm so sorry I didn't protect you. Zugwai felt the wave of emotion wash over her, and she clung to her sister, feeling a sense of safety and comfort that she hadn't felt in a long time. As they hugged, Zugwai pulled back and looked up at her sister, her eyes searching for an answer. Does he hit you too, Big Sis? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Tears streamed down her eyes, but Zugwai quickly wiped her tears, leaving the room in silence. A confused Zugwai sat speechless, raining silent curses on her in-law. She cried on the realization of why her once lively and happy sister had become more distant and quiet since the time she had come to visit. Just then, Mr. Kuzi walked into the room, his eyes scanning the space until they landed on Godia and Zugwai. Godia's eyes flashed with anger, and she took a step forward, her voice trembling with rage. How could you do this to my sister? Godia demanded, her eyes blazing with fury. She is just a child, and you are supposed to be taking care of her. Instead, you beat her and treat her like dirt. Mr. Kuzi's face darkened, and he took a step closer to Godia, his fist clenched. You don't know what you're talking about, he snarled. You don't know what's going on in this house. Godia stood her ground, her eyes never leaving Mr. Kuzi's face. I know exactly what you are going on. Kay, back at the handkerchief, she said, her voice steady, and I'm not going to let you get away with it. He got angry and hit her so hard that she landed on the floor. How dare you try to challenge me after everything I've done for you and your poor family? Years of misery had taken its toll on Zugwai, who had grown accustomed to avoiding Mr. Kuzi at all costs. However, on one fateful morning, she was jolted out of her routine by the sound of screams emanating from the master bedroom. Her heart racing, Zugwai rushed to get the neighbors, who promptly intervened. Unfortunately, the damage had already been done, and Godia had suffered yet another miscarriage. The horrific incident ultimately exposed Mr. Kuzi's true nature to the community, leading to his arrest and subsequent detention. As the woman assisted Godia and Zugwai in packing their belongings, Mr. Kuzi was compelled to confront the repercussions of his action. He confessed to having grown in a violent family, which had significantly influenced his behavior. Consequently, he was mandated to sign a legally binding agreement, pledging never to hit a woman again. This was the story of Zugwai and Godia. What is your own story? You can like, comment, share your story with us, and watch out for the next episode.